There's a lot of videos out there showing you how to properly use pre-stain, but nobody's actually talking about how pre-stain works. Why is that? Once you know how the product works, you're more confident in using it, and you can do the proper steps that are required to get the results that are desired. Most of us know that pre-stain wood conditioner reduces the likelihood of blotching, which is especially common in soft and porous woods. But how does it do that? It prepares the wood fibers to absorb the stain more evenly throughout the wood by raising the grain and creating a barrier that prevents the stain from penetrating too deeply into the wood. Where I'm going to walk you through the prep and the pre-stain process, the staining process, and adding a top coat so that your project can look great for years to come. I want you to watch this all the way through as each module builds on the previous set. And then at the very end, I'm going to take this board and cut it in half so we can really see how deep and even the stain is with the pre-stain versus not using one. All right, so now that we understand how pre-stain works, let's start with step one of using the pre-stain, and that is reading the instructions. I get it. Nobody actually likes to read instructions, and it's pre-stain, so it should just be like slapping it on, wiping it off, right?
Wax on, right hand, next circle, wax off, left hand, circle, wax on, wax off.
Well, not quite. So the first thing you need to do is figure out what stain you want to use. Is it a water-based stain or an oil-based stain? That will tell you what type of pre-stain you need, and it'll also tell you what type of top coat protectant that you're going to use. Water and oil don't mix, so using the appropriate setup will give you the best results possible. Also, sticking with the same manufacturer is a great idea. I'm using Minwax products, and the manufacturer tests their stain with their pre-stain so they know how it's going to react, and that will give you a more predictable outcome. So before we start the staining process, I'm going to prepare the boards the same way, starting with 80 grit, then 180 and 220. After the staining is complete, I'm going to use a tack cloth to make sure that all the dust is gone. If you want to learn more about a tack cloth, then check the link in the description, as well as any products that we're using today. They will also be linked in the description. Now on both boards, I'm going to run a piece of painter's tape down the center. And on one side of it is going to be the pre-stain, and on the other side will not be pre-stain. So you can see how the wood reacts differently. It's important to note here that you should want the absolute least amount of imperfections in your wood if the goal is supremely even stain. While different styles may be more welcoming to dents and scratches, these areas will be highlighted once you stain due to how the wood fibers are damaged and what that does to their ability to absorb the stain. Now that we're fully prepared, it's time to open the can of conditioner and stir it well. It's up to you how you want to apply the pre-stain. You can use a rag or a brush. My personal favorite is spraying it on. The important thing here is to apply it evenly in the direction of the grain and to let it sit for the recommended amount of time. 1 to 5 minutes for water-based or 5 to 15 minutes for oil-based. Now again, this is Minwax's specific recommendations, so if you're using a different product, you should probably check out the can. And then remove any excess with a lint-free cloth. You don't want this to dry on the wood, so set a timer if you need to. If you're using the water-based stain, you'll want to lightly sand down the raised grain with 220 grit sandpaper. Use your tack cloth to remove the dust and apply your water-based stain. If you're using the oil-based stain, you only have 2 hours to apply the stain. Although I'm not completely clear as to why you'd want to wait that long, if you miss that window for whatever reason, sand it down with 220 grit and reapply the pre-stain. Wipe it off after 5 minutes and then apply the stain. You'll want to follow the stain's recommendations for application length and dry time prior to adding another coat if you want it to be darker, or adding a protective finish if you're satisfied. So that was it for the pre-stain. Now, if you're ready to move on to the stain, I'll see you in the next video right here. There are too many videos out there promising to teach you how to apply stain. But the problem is they're using improper techniques and the final product doesn't even look good. Now this is video number 2 of a 3-part series where I go from prep to top coat. Now if you found this video because you're looking to learn how to apply stain, I highly suggest you check out the video number 1. It's only a few minutes long and the end card will lead you right back here. All right, let's get started. I'd like to take a second to answer the question of how does stain work? Wood is naturally porous with a network of tiny fibers and vessels that carry water and nutrients during the tree's life. Stain works by penetrating these wood pores and fibers using 2 things: dyes, which deeply color the wood, and pigments, settling on the surface, which together create a rich and natural looking finish that enhances the grain. Once absorbed, the solvents or water of the stain will evaporate, leaving behind the pigments and dyes embedded into the wood's fibers. All right, now you're up to speed. Let's open up the can and stir it well. If this is your very first time using this stain, I highly recommend trying it out first on a scrap piece of wood so that you know what to expect. Almost every video that I've watched shows people applying stain across the grain. Now this drives me nuts because scratches are easily seen when they go across the grain. Like I said in the pre-stain video, read the instructions. It's literally right on the can. For the water-based stain, you want to apply the stain with a synthetic pad, cloth, or brush in the direction of the grain and immediately wipe off the extra within 2 minutes, again in the direction of the grain using a clean cloth. In case you didn't see the first part of the series, the water-based stain has a dedicated pre-stain conditioner which is applied to this section of the board. If you're happy with the color, you can apply a top coat once dried, which should take about 1 to 2 hours. If you want it darker, wait the same 1 to 2 hours, but apply a second coat and wipe it off immediately. You do not need to sand between these coats. If you're using the oil-based stain, you'll want to use a synthetic cloth or brush and apply in the direction of the stain. Ensure that it's a thin and uniform coat and leave it for 5 to 15 minutes. The longer the wait time, the darker it will be. When you're ready, wipe off the excess in the direction of the grain with a clean cloth. Never let the stain dry on top of the board, or else cue blotchiness. If it's too light, you can go back over it in 4 to 6 hours without sanding in between coats. If you're happy with the color, you should wait 8 to 12 hours prior to applying a top coat to ensure that the wood is totally dry. So you got the stain on. Next thing to do is protect it, which is what we're gonna do in this video. 8 hours. Can't do shit for 8 hours. So what do? Edit the video. It doesn't matter how long you spent on the project itself. If it has a horrible finish, it's not worth a dime. Now we've only spent about an hour on staining these, plus a lot of wait for it to dry prior to our top coat. But you could spend days or weeks on like a cabinet or a built-in, and if it has a horrible finish, you are going to have some trouble. This is not the time to take shortcuts. Now, if you're finding us just because you want to learn how to top coat, I really appreciate you, and I would highly recommend the 2 videos prior to this, which is prep and pre-stain, and then the staining. They all build on top of each other. But without further ado, let's get into our top coats. Now, how do top coats work, you might ask? Glad you brought that up. When a top coat like polyurethane, lacquer, or varnish is applied to wood, it forms a protective film over the surface. The oil-based finishes can penetrate slightly, bonding with the wood fibers and filling the pores, while polyurethane primarily sits on the surface, creating a shield. Top coats seal the wood, blocking moisture and in some cases providing UV protection. They also enhance durability and offer a tough, wear-resistant surface. Additionally, top coats improve the wood's appearance by deepening the natural colors and various levels of sheen from matte to high gloss. Some finishes, such as varnish and marine spar urethane, are particularly durable and weather resistant, making them ideal choices for outdoor use. Now, admittedly, I don't do good with polyurethane finishes. That's why my go-to water-based is General Finishes Flat Out Flat Top Coat. Now, this is going to dry with a matte finish that lets the project speak for itself. Typically, I'd spray this on with an LV/LP spray gun, but I've made it this far through the video series without breaking out the spray tint, so I'm just going to brush this on tonight. Now, oil-based, the go-to is Zinsser's Bullseye Spray Shellac. You can't beat the ease of use of a spray-on, but they do have a brush-on option. I've just never used it. This will give you a slightly gloss finish, and it will highlight some of the characters in the grain differently than if you were to use a matte finish. As with everything that we've used thus far, stir the product or shake well prior to its use. There's no sanding before the top coat, but if your project has been sitting for a while, wiping it down with a tack cloth first to ensure that you remove any dust that may have accumulated will give you the best finish possible. I'll be using the same synthetic brush that I was using earlier and applying a liberal amount with a smooth and even stroke, allowing lap lines to form. Those lap lines will tighten down as it dries. Now, it's recommended to do 3 coats with a 2-hour driving window in between them. Once dry, lightly sand with 320 grit sanding sponge, which is recommended, and then wipe it clean with a tack cloth. Then apply your second coat and your third coat in the same manner. Now, the shellac is an impressive product with an incredibly fast drying time. I'm using the spray can, but they also have a quart can that you can apply via brush or rag. It's most likely more cost effective if you're doing a lot of pieces. The only instructions on the can is to remain 10 to 12 inches away from the object and use multiple light coats, allowing the shellac to become tacky in between the coats, which is about 10 minutes around here in California. Now, you can go too heavy with this, so take your time here. That was it. It is simple, but you just have to follow the instructions. Stay with the grain and take your time, no shortcuts. All right, so for the for the matte finish, I mean, you can't tell that there's a finish on there, and that's kind of the point. It allows the product to show through. Now, as far as the blotchiness goes, you can kind of see down here where in between the grain there is some deeper, darker color, and it's just inconsistent. Up here, it's much more consistent. Now, it's really easy to see in the oil-based stain, clear difference on how uniform this is up here, and this is true blotchiness down here. Now, along the edges, it absorbs differently, and that's pretty normal because it gets into the wood fibers, and it's like a straw. So it just sucked it in through the backside. So that's why the edge doesn't look so hot. But now for the moment you guys have been waiting for. I know I've been waiting for it. I can't wait to see it. I'm gonna cut these in half. So honestly, I thought that this would be more of a drastic view. The stain really doesn't go very far into the wood at all, whether it's the water-based or oil-based. I definitely was under the impression that it would be, I don't know, like 1/8 of an inch, but it's literally just on the top surface, which makes sense for the water-based, where this was a wipe on, wipe off very quickly. But this oil-based, it sat for probably 10 minutes and it's still not very far. So please tell me what you think in the comments. Does the pre-stain make a difference? Will you use pre-stain now that you've seen these results? Now, throughout this video series, I've talked a lot about the tack cloth. If you're looking for more information, check out this video right here.